Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, hey, everybody. Thanks so much for coming. We're excited to have you with us. And my name is Andrew, like you said, Andrew Bartlett. This is my wife, Hannah. And we're just excited to talk to you guys today about promotional films. So before we start, just a couple of questions. How many of you guys have made a promo film before of any kind? Okay. Yeah. I mean, I feel like a lot of us have done it at some level. How many of you would like to make better promo films? All right, we're in the right place. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and pray real quick, and then we'll jump into it. Thank you, Lord, so much for your goodness in bringing us here. I thank you for everyone that's come to this session and help us to be able to just communicate clearly and efficiently, Lord. Help us be a blessing, and pray that you would use what we have to share in people's lives to build your kingdom. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. So before we start, does anybody else need a handout? Anybody that came in last minute? Okay, we've got a few over here, one there, and a couple up front. Thank you so much. So a little bit of an introduction to us. So we run a creative agency called Bartlett Idea Company. We do video, branding, websites, social media content for clients. We also run another company called Motion University, where we're passionate about helping teach others things that we've learned in the promotional filmmaking space. So if you were here for our last session, you heard us talk about our creative agency and how we got started in film. We also talked about some of the mindset behind promotional filmmaking and some practical tips on doing it full time. In this session, we're going to show you our process. So first, we're going to look at several examples of films that we've created so that you can get kind of a context for the type of films that we're talking about. And second, we're going to walk through our pre-production, production, and post-production process, how we approach crafting the story of film, as well as how we like to weave in some narrative storytelling ideas. Andrew usually he directs, he's the visionary, he develops the story. I'm a little bit more the left brain, so I'm like producing or ADing these projects. So he'll kind of be touching on more of his creative process. I'll be touching on some of the logistical stuff. And there's no way we can cover everything in depth in 45 minutes and still leave room for questions. So our hope is that you can just take away the overall framework of how we do this and kind of start adding some of those steps to your process for your projects. So we will start out with some examples of a couple projects we've done. This first one is a promotional film we did, a recruiting film for the Riverside County Sheriff's Department in Southern California. This was probably one of the most intensive projects that we've done. We had over 16 days on location with 3 separate shooting blocks and 10 to 12 people on the crew, kind of depending on which block we were shooting. We also had like a full post-production team, custom score. So this is the Riverside County Sheriff's Department film.
All right. And budget was around,
Oh, yes.
70 to 90,000. We weren't sure if we were allowed to say the exact budget, but you can kind of guess from there. So, all right, here we go.
We chose service above self because as an agency, we believed in our community and we believed that they came first.
It's a simple motto, but it encompasses the entire job that we do.
A lot of people tend to think of our job as, okay, we're just out there to arrest and take the bad guys to jail.
But really, there's a completely different world of law enforcement out there that people don't realize.
I have to put my thoughts, my feelings, everything aside to help keep the public and our deputies safe.
Our dispatchers are the first line of contact.
They're like the heartbeat. They take the calls as they come in and they have to give that information to us so that we can respond as soon as possible to assist.
And then after we do our work in patrol, we have to do something with those people that are arrested and they go into our jails.
Corrections is extremely rewarding. People that want to commit crimes are brought to our facilities and it's our job to ensure that they stay there so that the public can sleep at night safely.
The ultimate goal of corrections is to make sure that the inmates that we have don't come back.
We have a wide variety of vocational training programs to help them rejoin the community and be productive.
It's very fulfilling to me to be able to have that piece in law enforcement that a lot of people don't know about.
One different function of law enforcement can't happen without all of the others.
There are so many different areas that you can work.
We have mountains, we have deserts, we have rural areas, we have cities.
biggest resource that we have is the people that we have working for us. Know they're all trained, have the right equipment, and are willing to go out there and do the job.
If you want to do law enforcement, you have to be willing to sacrifice.
The commitment to this career, it's immeasurable.
We have to go to the people's lowest points in their lives.
I've seen our own department members lay down their lives for each other, for the community, and that's what we stand for. That's what we believe in, and that's what we do.
The overwhelming support that we have from our community is like no other.
When I'm out in my uniform, I get a lot of people saying, "Thank you for doing what you do."
Our goal is to support the community. Our goal is to protect the community. And so when I think about service above self, that's what we're doing.
You go all in on this job.
Are you ready to make that commitment? Are you prepared to make those sacrifices?
Because if we don't, who will?
That was a fun project. So next we're gonna take a look at one more project. This one's a little bit of a smaller project, still one of our favorite Brandon films that we've made. So this is for the Greenville Presbyterian Theological Seminary. And the challenge with creating a promo for a seminary is a lot of the times they're just sitting in classrooms and studying. So like, how do we find creative ways to make that interesting with energy and excitement? This was a much smaller team on this project. So we only had three crew members on set, Andrew and I and Jaden, who's in the back there. And yeah, with this project, we're gonna use a lot of examples in our talk today from this project, also a few from Riverside, but mostly from this one. As you can see, this one is kind of in that $15,000 to $20,000 budget range. Yeah, so
All right, we'll
let's go ahead and play it.
Seminary education is in a race to the bottom. What you get in seminary doesn't necessarily meet the standards that it used to meet.
Our wrong view of the ministry has led to a watered-down education.
Having pastors who are not well rooted and well grounded in the word, that has a ripple effect into the church.
As Christ loved the church and we love the church, we ought to dedicate our best efforts to serving her.
We need more than ever men to be better equipped than they were in the previous generation.
The question you should be asking is not which option is the shortest, but what is going to best prepare me for the high calling that is the calling of a gospel minister.
I am grateful for Greenville's commitment to quality.
If we want to have a well-rounded ministry, we're going to need to have a well-rounded seminary education.
If you're a GPTS, your Master of Divinity degree is 120 credit hours.
We begin with biblical studies, the languages, and then systematic theology, church history, historical theology, and then, of course, the pastoral and practical sides of ministry, from preaching to pastoral care and missions.
The truths that we were learning in seminary, the truths of Scripture, are truths for life. We're not desiring just to pass information from one brain to other brains. We're desiring to make disciples.
God used Greenville Seminary in a profound way to prepare me for the ministry that I have today.
Anything you want to do well requires training.
No athlete is immediately in perfect shape. He has to train.
If you're truly called to gospel ministry, then you want to be tested because you want to stand before God's people as someone who's approved.
The stakes of pastoral ministry could not be higher. The eternal destinies of immoral souls hangs in the balance. The best things that a man can do with his life surely are going to be incredibly difficult. But it's worth it because it's for the Church of Jesus Christ.
So, thank you. So both of these projects, we were using real people from the seminary, professors and students, real law enforcement officers. And we really use the same process for both of these projects. So the process that we're going to walk you through can really apply to any size. You just kind of have to scale it up or down depending on the project. And even if not every project follows the same steps, it's super important to have a process to follow. And you can deviate from that when needed. So to start, you're just going to jump into that.
So next we're going to talk about the process. So to me, crafting a promotional film isn't just about capturing some talking heads and slapping some random B-roll on it. You kind of ran around shooting last minute. To me, it's an opportunity to tell an amazing story about the incredible things people are doing and engage with an audience at a very real and tangible level. The reason for, probably the vast majority of the projects that we do, the baseline is interviews, is that it really just grounds the stories. If you have narration, it's all scripted, it could just be making it all up. But when you have real people talking from real experiences, it just really brings a level of seriousness to the project that people really pay attention to. So we like to incorporate also, you can kind of get a vibe for it from those films, incorporating a narrative thread throughout the film. So, if you have a film that's kind of just random things kind of put together, it's hard for the audience to really be able to kind of engage and follow because you don't know where it's going. But if you kind of have, even whether it's in the visuals or whatever it might be, you might just be as simple as like a day in the life. They come in the morning and they leave in the evening and they do their thing in the middle. It gives it a progression that kind of helps build and tell that story. It could be as complicated as like showing the story of someone's life. We've done that. Doing it in 3 minutes is very tricky, but it not only does it make it more engaging, but it just really helps kind of communicate the message even better. Yes.
Where are you?
So we're starting at the top. I think we didn't have any section for the examples in the handout, if I remember correctly.
Yes. So we are just jumping into the top part with the discovery.
Yes. Yep.
Yes. Good question.
So
good question.
We're talking. First of all, we're jumping into. Actually, I'm getting ahead of myself. We're going to talk about discovery first.
Which is part of the
pre-production process. So for us, typically pre-production is about 6 to 8 weeks. Now, obviously, you can do it in less if you have to, but in an ideal world, that's what we like to have.
And some it's more, depending on when the client reaches out and when we have availability, but that's the general, how long it takes us to do our side of things. So the first thing is discovery, which you'll see on your handouts there. So when we first hear from a client, we meet with them to get to know them and find out as many details about their company and the project as possible. After that, we'll put together a proposal. Usually that will include things like scope of work, budget, example projects, etc. After that's finalized, we'll do the contract and then do an official discovery meeting once the contract has been signed to nail down any further details. So at that point, we're really doing the nitty-gritty. It's still brainstorming stage as the creative kind of hasn't been nailed down yet, but we're talking over key potential scenarios, departments, individuals, locations that they maybe want highlighted in the film, as well as going over like the pre-production timeline, for the project and expectations, which is a huge part of letting the client know what it's going to look like. This also could include more in-depth talking about the challenges that the client might be facing, their brand, their industry, nailing down what the key message is that they want to communicate.
Yeah, so the next part in the process, and myself being the creative director and directing a lot of these projects, for me, the next step is for me to just nail down those details. The way that I start is by kind of just brain dumping all the information. We just went through this in-depth discovery call with them, understanding who they are and what they want to accomplish, dumping all of that onto a whiteboard, trying to just get it all out in the open. I start to kind of look and see what comes to mind in terms of themes that kind of surface. And also at this point, it's also kind of starting to brainstorm what that storyline, the B-roll, and stuff could be used to kind of cover, as well as like what subject matters we might want to touch on in the interviews. So the next part of my process, I call it my waveform, the content and visual waveform. It's the way that my brain works, so it may not be helpful for everyone. But essentially what that is I just kind of chart out the different sections of the film. So on the top, we have the visuals, and on the bottom, we have the content. So the content would be what the interviewees are saying. The top is what the viewer's seeing in the visuals. And that really just helps me start piecing together the overall film. And ideally, you want to have the visuals saying something complementary, but not the same as what the interviews are saying. So example would be, we like to make red cars. And you're like, here's red cars. Or you could show B-roll of them building stuff and whatever, where it's like, that's kind of a bad example, but you ideally have something where it's like you're broadening the point or emphasizing the point better rather than just saying the same thing twice with both. Sometimes I'll do it with sticky notes if I'm kind of just like moving things around. It's quick and easy. Sometimes I'll do it on a whiteboard more, or sometimes I'll do it on my iPad. It just kind of depends on. But that really just helps me start to kind of map out what the story is going to look like and how we can make it flow. Sometimes you're trying to put together many different pieces, and so it's a matter of trying to position all the goals and figure out, do we need to drop some stuff if we're trying to cover too much, what we can fit.
Is your peaks and valleys your speed?
Yes, more or less. Yeah, so it kind of like, so this is actually from that first example, the Riverside film. So it's kind of like it opens with kind of higher energy. It's almost an energy graph, for lack of a better thing. But then it's kind of rising towards the end. So we have, that opening teaser, kind of faster stuff, and then actually I think we cut that part. We went straight in more kind of right here. But and then regular day kind of builds, and then we drop for that kind of like that tender moment with the color guard. And then it kind of like ramps up to the end and then drops. So that's kind of I'm just like in my mind kind of charting out the energy of the thing. So again, may not be helpful for everyone. It's just sort of helpful for me to kind of think about it. And also I can start to see how much time I'm spending on different things so that I don't overemphasize one point versus another. So then the next thing for me is to, once I have that information and it's all organized, I'm starting to feel kind of what that flow looks like. The next thing is to start looking for music. I'm a very musically driven person, and so for me, that's the way that I really think when it comes to building the story. So a lot of times I'll look through stock libraries, looking for a track that just has the right elements, and usually what I'm looking for is something that sort of matches my chart, my graph, which sometimes literally the waveform will show it sort of similar. Sometimes you have to cut up a track and kind of merge it, but I'm always looking for something that has progression. A lot of stock music, it's flat, or it's just like it starts and it goes and it stops. Or you'll have one that's just a linear ramp. And neither of those really work for what we do. In a lot of ways, what we're doing is more similar to a trailer. So we want to have rises and falls and kind of different key moments to call out.
Is there 6 out of 8 weeks?
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes it feels like it. It can be a very challenging process. If I'm working with a composer, what I love to do is start by having a kind of cutting together a rough temp track. It could just be with non-licensable music and stuff. But then what I'll do is I will work with the composer in pre-production to compose basically a basic version of the track. And then I build off of that when we go to shoot it. So for me, I like having the music before I even go to shoot anything. So, and again, we're moving really quickly through this stuff because there's a lot to cover in 45 minutes. But we're happy to answer more questions about it after too. So the next thing in the process is creating an animatic. So how many people here have heard of an animatic before? Okay, a good number of folks. That's great. So essentially, a traditional animatic would be storyboards to music, in your video editor. Something that I've started doing, or kind of done really for a long time, that I find is super helpful, is to start with basically what I call a text animatic. So what I'll do is I'll take that track that I found or I've cut up, and then I will put that into my video editor, and then I'll start building the shot list in the video editor right to the music. And so I'll usually include, you can see on the top here is sort of like the shot description, and then the bottom is sort of the kind of what the interviewees are saying. Sometimes it's like temp lines that I'll write. It just kind of gives me a sense of what this thing is going to look like. It's really just helps me build that shot list, and also develop, I feel like more clever shot ideas that then if you're just trying to randomly brainstorm stuff and put it in a list, when you have that music to kind of riff off of, it adds a ton of thought. So finding that music is so important. It's also super helpful for when I'm on set because I can keep referencing back for how long shots can be. It's so easy to make shots way too long for how much they'll fit, especially a lot of the shots we're talking fraction of a second. So I'll show you an example here of the, this is the animatic from that GPTS film, the seminary film. I won't play the whole thing, but you can kind of get a sense of what that looked like. So this was created before we went and shot anything. Sometimes it's vague, but I know what I mean. Something ready. And I'll sometimes incorporate, if I see some cool bits from other things, I'll throw them in as concepts.
Music bed. Music bed.
You can tell I got that one. So,
There's an idea.
anyways, you can kind of get a sense of it pretty much matches what we shot. And so you essentially have a very clear map of what you need. So that's the next thing then that I like to do is also put together a mood board. So a mood board is essentially just a collection of imagery of like the overall look and feel for the film. That's super helpful not only for me to kind of develop, but also when I'm working with Jaden or somebody to DP the project, that we can kind of communicate on what lighting style and things that we're going for and be consistent with that. So that's the mood board. So once we've created all of that stuff, right? We've talked with the client up front, and then we've gotten that information, and then I'm trying to do that development work to come up with a concept and a story and an idea for this film. Then we create what I call a creative pitch. So we already have a contract signed with the client, but then we go back to them and I present the concept. I won't go through, we could show this actual slide at some point if somebody wanted, but for sake of time, essentially we're covering all the stuff I just showed you that's in that presentation, kind of broken down. We talk through it. And that really helps us align and make sure that we're getting buy-in from the client on exactly, once you see that animatic and you see the visuals, all those things, it's like you got a pretty clear idea of what film we're gonna make. And that way there's a lot less changes in post because it's pretty well nailed down. So once we, so this is, again, getting that feedback and like changes and adjustments before we go shoot anything, super critical. So once we get sign off on that from the client, then the next thing is to build out the interview questions. So essentially what we're doing is reverse engineering what I've kind of put in as like the subject matters and figure out how can I ask questions that will kind of lead to those things. I'll also sometimes create starter lines. So if I because the difficulty is always to get things punchy and tight enough, right? You can get like a 2-minute long, paragraph of words from somebody, but when you have a 3-minute film, it doesn't really work. And so, it's really, we'll create actual scripted lines that we can feed them, or we'll have kind of like starter lines, and we'll usually use those if we feel like we need just a couple of really key transition moments or kind of punchy pieces. That's kind of what we do there. And then once we have that, we also, if I have key sequences, then I will storyboard those. I'm no artist, but you can see this is like the intro to the Riverside film, following the girl, she walks to the, interacts with the horse, those scenes. So it helps me just really plan out exactly what shots. Then I'll even take that, put that then into the animatic, and you just keep building more and more kind of like levels of detail for the planning side. The animatic and all this stuff is super helpful for the rest of your team once you get to like the logistics side, because then they can know a better idea of what you're looking to do and how that's going to work. Finally, so we've got one more thing that I like to do before we get onto set, and I call it my playbook. So essentially what I'll do is I'll develop kind of just a document that I'll include kind of all of my shot list, different random ideas and things. We have actually a new version also that we started including, like, it's a playbook that kind of expands across to everyone then in the team, where it has like needed talent and resources and all these kind of things. So every scene we kind of have like a cheat sheet where it's like, here's the shots we need, here's sort of the mood boards of kind of what we're going for, here's the people and assets and things we need. And again, that's super helpful just for me to communicate to Hannah if she's producing or ADing or whoever, to know exactly what's in my head. Because sometimes I'll say, I want a scene with, people, somebody gets pulled over in the car, and then it's like, oh, the assumption is there's a cop and then there's a guy in a car. But actually, in my mind, I want it to be on a busy street. So that means we need to have like 4 other cars available. So it helps me if I write down what I'm thinking needs to be included as additional people and assets. So I know I was like screaming through all of that. We'll answer more questions on that later, but for sake of time, we'll go ahead and kind of jump into the more logistical side.
Yeah, that playbook is so helpful. That's such a key part of me being able to understand all that. So first, location scout. I know this is probably a given on a lot of things, but if you can, do a location scout. We're not always able to do it with our clients, depending on the location. But if we can, we go to as many key locations as you can think of, decide what areas are going to work best, and note things like parking, bathrooms, time of day of the week you'll be there. For example, parking might change downtown on a weekend versus a weekday. So not the day you're actually there, but the day you're going to be shooting. For location scouting, interview locations, sound is hugely important. We've had it happen multiple times where we're scouting, we're like, okay, sounds are pretty good, we can turn off the air conditioning if we need to or whatever. We get there and, you know, something big is happening next door that day or whatever. So talking about the day of is really important with the client. Also make sure to take pictures and video. As you can kind of see here, our location scout from the Greenville Presbyterian.
Different Greenville one. But
yeah. Location scout there. It's important to get the pictures and video for your team. Sometimes we do the location scout like on our prep day, which we'll talk about later in production. But if we can, sometimes we'll do a separate trip because that can affect the creative side as well.
Yeah.
All right, next is scheduling. And again, we could have a whole session just on scheduling. But we're gonna just kind of breeze through this so you can just kind of get a feel for our process. So really start working with some of your most important locations and people to nail down when they will or won't be available, and then work from there. Often this has to be reworked several times before you land on your final schedule, and then it changes when you're on set again.
Yep.
The producer and AD, which are sometimes the same person on a smaller project, they have to make sure they're working together to figure out everybody's availability and locations and who's available when.
Yeah.
And then you're also having to figure out the most efficient way to do everything. So it may be like this person's available this day, but we need to do all 3 locations in this city on this day, so everybody has to be available that day. So there's just a lot of communication and things you have to plan out, especially with cast too, which, like I said, in a lot of our projects, it's employees of the company that we're working with. So you have to be working closely with the client to be like, okay, if we're, for example, when we were interviewing the sheriff, he's a very busy man. Like we literally had to fly down and do a block of shooting just for the one day and the 1 hour he was available to shoot with us. So you often have to be working closely with the client on all of that. And then Andrew kind of mentioned this, but this is something we did on a recent project. It was super helpful. It's like a visual schedule. So this is especially helpful for Andrew as the director, for him to have kind of a list of like, okay, here's the shot we're doing. Here's a description of the scene. Who do we need in this shot? How long do we have to shoot it? So he's listing out kind of the creative. I'm adding in some of the logistics. So it's kind of like a one-stop shop for, you know, us communicating and being able to know what we're doing. Okay, so another thing in this part of the process is getting permits ahead of time. Especially for like the Riverside project where we're doing a lot of locations and stuff. Some city and county permits you may need to start working on like 4 to 6 weeks in advance at least. It can also be helpful to send location release forms ahead of time, depiction release forms ahead of time if you know the locations and the people that you're working with. It's also good to make sure you have any necessary insurance also at that 4 to 6 weeks ahead, especially when working in California. Man, that was rough. We had to get a lot of COIs, a lot of release forms, you know. So make sure you're doing that plenty in advance so you're not dealing with problems on set with that. Client communication. So this is something that we've learned a lot about and are still learning, but setting expectations early with the client. It's hard for me to keep in mind sometimes that like, we've been doing this a while, we've done a lot of promo films, but the client, they have no idea what your process is. So making sure you're saying it out loud, you're verbalizing it, you're communicating those expectations, how long pre-production takes, what their role is gonna be in pre-production or production ahead of time, locking locations, locking schedules. A lot of times, like, you know, we said it takes the 6 to 8 weeks. So a lot of times we don't have things really nailed down till like a week before we start shooting. This can impact the client, their staff, their equipment, their locations, all the things they're using of theirs. It can be really stressful for them to find out you need something 3 days in advance. So try as much as you can to have all of that done ahead of time and then communicate it to them in time for them to then make changes that are needed.
Yeah, a lot of times they're having to like notify staff to stay late or to do things, and so they want to give the courtesy to their employees that like at least a week of heads up, you know, at minimum.
At a minimum, because sometimes
Ideally
they'll find out they're on vacation or whatever, or they work 8 to 5 and we're shooting a 12-hour day. So yeah, that's very important. We also provide usually like a simplified schedule to the client, kind of like what we saw with the the other one, the visual schedule. Yeah. Sometimes we'll take something like that, maybe simplify it. They don't maybe need to know all the details and information, but you're simplifying it down so they can see what resources are needed at what time. All right, so next is communicating with key talent. And by talent, I mean it could be employees of the company, or it could be actual, actors that you're working with. Let them know when they're needed, what to expect, and what to wear. This is so important, especially for people who are not in film. If these are employees that you're interviewing or that they're acting in these scenes, like, the law enforcement stuff or the seminary stuff, you need to make sure you're really communicating to them what to expect. There's often a lot of hurry up and wait on a film set. They need to know to expect that, to expect what time to come and what to wear. In the past, when we've relied on the client to do that communicating to their employees, especially the key people, the interviewees, and the key scenes, something's got lost in translation. So it's important, if possible, for you to be the one saying, hey, can I have their email? Can I have their number? Can I be in touch with them directly?
Yeah. Usually what we'll do is we'll have like key talent, so like interviewees, like key people that we're following throughout the story. We have direct communication with them. And then for like background extras and stuff, usually we kind of let them communicate that more directly. Because sometimes we're talking like 50 people's worth.
Exactly.
And it's like, we don't need to do all of that. They already have internal communication channels. But yeah, it's just more or less key talent for sure. If you got to try to have contact for.
And you can see the wardrobe document up here. This is something just really simple I threw together to send to, we've used this for multiple different clients. Be extremely specific about wardrobe. So a lot of times I'll tell them this specifically, and then they even still won't do the right thing. So also have them bring multiple options so that you can go, okay, this is a really bright striped shirt. Let's not do that one. We'll do this instead. But having like visual examples of colors and styles, and specifically saying, please don't wear big logos or bright colors for this interview, because you're thinking of the company brand here as well. Like if this is law enforcement film, I mean, they wear tan and green. You don't want bright pink in the scene, like where they were like had the flag for the officer that had passed away. You don't want someone in the background wearing a really bright color. That's going to distract from the emotion of that scene. So having the right wardrobe can really up the quality of the project, and communicating that, especially to people who haven't been on film before, you have to be really specific.
And that's actually one of the things that really contributes to like that cinematic look, is controlling the colors in the scene. So a lot of times when you're just showing up and shooting something and you've got bright primary colors and just all kinds of stuff, especially like schools are notorious for this, but you want to try as much as possible to control the color palette, because that will really make a huge difference. So this is actually the wardrobe document we sent for that Greenville Presbyterian Theological Seminary film. So you can kind of see like the wardrobe color kind of match the overall look and feel of the film. It just helps all of that feel more cohesive.
And that client had a dress code for their students as well. So we had to make sure to tell anybody who's going to be on camera, please follow the dress code for what the client is asking for. Okay, one more quick thing. There's a lot more we could go into, but one more quick thing is just deciding on the gear that you need. Often the DP is the one doing this, along with the director.
We were going to talk about
communicate the crew. Yes, I skipped ahead one. So after, communicating with the talent and the client and all of that, communicating with the crew. This is hugely important. So have team meetings to go over the creative or logistical as needed. Do it enough in advance so that they can order gear. And when Andrew's directing and I'm ADing or producing, it's super important to be running key things past each other as often as possible at different points along the process, so there's not a disconnect. I mean, you kind of touched on that earlier. That's where the playbook really comes in handy for me, because it's hard sometimes for him to always, he's very visual. How do I put that on paper? So for me to understand how many people he's wanting for a scene or colors or all of that, putting it in the playbook is super helpful. So those check-ins along the way. And now we're at gear. So decide what you need ahead of time. We rent a lot of gear using Lens Rentals and companies like that. Make sure you obviously have enough things ahead of time: batteries, memory cards, backup drives, the things you maybe wouldn't think about. Make sure you have those prepared ahead of time for the shoot.
All right, awesome. So that was just pre-production. We haven't shot anything yet. So again, that's normally 6 to 8 weeks. Production, a lot of our, like that GBTS one, that was about 5 days, if I remember correctly. Obviously the Riverside one was a lot more, because that was like so big of scope and so many locations. But I'd say traditionally for a film like that, a week is around what we figure on timeline. And yeah, so really, as you get into production and kind of start shooting your film, you'll find that having spent so much time on pre-production it's not wasted effort by any means. Your shoot is going to go so much better if you're able to kind of follow that shot list and storyboards. But obviously, things will change. You'll have things that pop up that you didn't expect. So you do have to have that in the moment inspiration as well and adapt as you run into things. But again, there's a ton more we could cover on all of that. But hopefully that at least gives you a good overview of kind of how we approach the pre-production stage for the project. So that brings us to production. And we have a fun little BTS film that Jaden helped us put it together from this shoot. There was only the three of us on the project, so we didn't shoot a ton of footage. But it's just kind of fun to take a look kind of behind the scenes.
This is for the seminary project.
Yeah.
We are here on our second interview set of the day. We filmed 3 interviews today. We've filmed in these classrooms several times already, so we need to make it look a little different. We got our key light here, X300D with the light dome, kicker going into the ceiling to give us kind of a nice wrap around. The 600 with the F10 for now in the back, hitting just kind of highlighting some of that goodness in the background, set decoration. The nice rainy windows are giving us some texture in the background, a little bit of life to the scene.
We are working on shooting some stuff in the library. So we've got a bunch of fog going, we've got sunlight coming in. We have a 600D outside the window, and then we've just got a couple of the lights just balcony to kind of bring up the ambience since the exterior light is so bright. We're doing some studying montages, and we're doing some classroom stuff here later today. Thank you. All right, so the next thing we're going to talk about, so there's so much we could cover under production, right? How we do lighting, all that kind of stuff. There's other workshops on those subjects, but we want to kind of hit some key highlights that we thought would be helpful tidbits as you're looking at producing a promotional film. And so the first one that a lot of us, you don't have huge budgets oftentimes for promo work. And so choosing the right team will make or break your project. So we found there's like several different crew sizes kind of depending on project size that we found work well. So for kind of a smaller project, we should have had more people on that GPTS one, but it was 3 of us. We did have one kind of PA come in and help for one of the days, but so the ideal layout that we've found works well for us. In my case, you could pair some different ones together, but what we've done, director, then producer AD, and a DP/gaffer, and a key grip. So you have like 4 people. That's usually a pretty good. We just did a project a couple weeks ago with that. It depends also like how much gear you're toting around, all that kind of thing. But you can get a lot done with like 3 to 4 people. You can get a lot of really good stuff really quickly. Again, it just depends on the scope of what you want to capture. Mm-hmm. Kind of a medium project. 7 people, a little bit more comfortable. You're splitting out those roles to individual people. So that's a little bit more like 7 people. So director, producer, AD, DP, AC, gaffer, and key grip. So I'm realizing those are acronyms. Or or I don't know if that's the right word, abbreviations. So director, producer, assistant director, director of photography, assistant camera, gaffer, and key grip. And then for like a larger project, so something like that Riverside project, we had around 12 people. So it'd be, director, producer, AD, DP, AC, gaffer, key grip, production designer, art PA. Often we'll bring in our own catering at that point, which is usually a friend who makes really good food. And it's just a huge way just to especially when you've got like a week of going out to eat, it's just like, it's maybe nice every now and again, but like going out to eat like at least 2 meals a day just gets old really, really fast. So if you have a larger budget, it's great to have home cooked food. It's a real morale boost for folks. So that's kind of the choosing your team. Another point would be making time for prep. This was a huge mistake that we made early on, was not doing that. And so you show up, especially if you're doing a travel project, you show up and then literally the next morning you got to start shooting and you're kind of just still getting your bearings. So we usually try to take maybe a day if possible. So that allows us to do location scouting, allows camera department to kind of set up cameras and get everything going, get lights tested and all those kind of things. Also just have meetings and kind of get all on the same page. But sometimes it could be just half a day. It really just depends on the size of the project. So another aspect is, like Hannah was mentioning, a lot of what we do is working with real people and real places. And so for the majority of what we do, a lot of it happens at the client's location, but sometimes we're going and finding like other locations to kind of augment that story. But there's a couple helpful tips. One would be when, especially like the law enforcement's like easy example where it's like, I'm not in law enforcement, I won't know everything about what they do. The more we work with them, the more we pick up on things, but every department does something different. The same would be with like, if we're working with a machining company, they're making parts or something. When we're gonna go shoot a scene, we'll try to talk through with those people, what do they do normally, and just really get a sense of like kind of talking through it, how they would normally do it, and then that allows us to kind of build the scene from there. Especially also when working with non-actors, which is mostly what we do, giving them something to do looks a lot better than trying to have them act something. So rather than saying, can you pretend to do whatever X, Y, or Z, you can say, okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to grab this thing, you're going to look at it, you're going to inspect it, and if you can talk to them in terms of their job, of what they normally do, like, oh, yeah, I can do that, versus, can you walk over here and then look over this direction?
Contemplative.
Then they're like, okay, and it looks terrible. But instead, if you're like, okay, so a lot of times I'll try to pick targets for them essentially, where it's like, I want the shot of him walking and then looking up to the corner. What I'll do is I'll say, can you grab this part, walk over here, and then put it up on the shelf, or look where you're going to put it and then put it on the shelf. Something like that, where it's helping them understand it in the terms of what they would normally think of. Last thing on that is we often do the interviews first. One, because it's a little bit easier thing to start with. But also it just helps us to kind of get the stories from people, and sometimes that'll inform new ideas that we hadn't thought of before. Let's see, we're going to time.
Yeah, so the last couple I'm just going to run through really quick and as part of the process here.
Yeah.
So taking good care of your crew. Kind of goes without saying, but it's easy to overlook this. So we've learned a lot on this over the years. A few things that we do is we try to cap our days. So like, right now, most of our projects, they're capped at 12 hours. We're trying to see if we can get more projects down to 10 hours a day. But yeah, that can be really helpful for your crew.
Just because you're a small crew doesn't mean you can wear them out.
Exactly. And just because it's 3 days doesn't mean you should wear them out either. Have plenty of good quality snacks and food on set, like Andrew's saying, like this is a key part. And the biggest thing really is just having a good attitude on set. Things are gonna go wrong. Mm-hmm. And so if you're leading a crew, lead them in prayer, lead them in a good attitude, and in having a positive and grateful attitude on set. That can go really, really far. Last thing that we want to mention in production is making sure to offload all your footage and sound files every day. So at the end of the day, even if you're exhausted, make sure that you are offloading. Make multiple copies on 2 or 3 separate hard drives. Sometimes we even have different people fly home with the different hard drives because you don't want to redo all this stuff you just did. Yeah. And then, make sure that you've done that and copied it multiple times before you format those cards. All right, post-production. We're gonna go through post-production kind of fast. We have time for some question and answer at the end. But
so again, post-production can be around 6 to 8 weeks as well.
Yes.
That's kind of our normal, like if somebody comes to us and is like, hey, can you do a project? 6 to 8 weeks of prep, week of shooting, 6 to 8 weeks of post. Again, you can fudge that one
Kind
way
of
or the
depends
other,
on
but-
if you're like working on other projects too. Like if we have
Yeah.
multiple things going on at a time or a trip somewhere in there or whatever, it's going to take a little bit longer. So this is really where all the pieces come together. If you spent enough time in pre-production, post will be a lot easier than if you just made it up when you went along. So this is where you're really reaping those rewards. There will always be things that change in post, even when you have an animatic and all of these things. Like on Riverside, some things changed in post. We had to rework some of the story. But because we had that process in place, that helped us get to a better point. So first is the rough draft. So when you start in post, start by cutting down interviews. That's usually what we start with. Having kind of just that foundation, that skeleton for the project really is the interviews for a lot of the work that we do. Remove the dead space, organize the best lines by subject. We often color those. And then roughen the story flow, test different combinations, do refining as needed. Once the structure is solid, gather team feedback. So either from your team, from others outside your team who haven't seen the project before, that can be important as well.
Super helpful.
And then adding the B-roll, obviously, and iterating through the different drafts. Yeah, so having other people look at your work is just hugely helpful at this stage. Yeah, and a lot of times we go through, I don't know, 20 drafts of a project, you know. So there's a lot of things we're doing internally to refine this part of it.
Yeah, and I'll say 20 drafts internally, so us like small iterations
Yes,
or larger
exactly.
before we'll even show it to the client. So that brings us to then kind of the solid draft point. So usually we try to get it to a really good solid draft before we send it to the client. So basically like 90% done. So you've got your interviews, your B-roll, kind of where you think they'll end up pretty close to final, not including those sound and color, because those are things that you don't want to have to redo if you do make changes. So we really want the client's first impressions to be good. So a lot of times they're not able to see it the way we do, or like we can kind of imagine what a more refined version would be, and they don't usually have any context wherewith to do that. And so that's why we try to get it kind of as far as we can on the first version that they see. And then also that allows us to then iterate and make changes before we, again, go and do the final polishes. So next is final polish. So once we got an approved and locked edit, client revisions and review, I jumped ahead. So typically we'll give 3 rounds of revision on a project, so that's in the contract. So we have that, the first solid draft, then we get feedback, and then we do another round, get feedback, and then we'll do the final draft with kind of all the bells and whistles. Yeah. And so we like to use Frame.io for feedback. So this allows them to go in and be able to actually like make notes, throughout very easily. It's easier than them being like, yeah, so that point where it says this or this, and you're like, wait, what? Like which point is that? Just makes it very clear. And yeah, so that's kind of what we do with that. And then so then we're kind of going to that final polish and final deliverables. So that includes your color. That's once your film has been locked, if interviews are locked, then you do color, sound, VFX, titles, all that kind of stuff to kind of polish it off. We'll often bring in an external, like a colorist, like JC, who's doing the session next door about color, to do a color pass. We'll do a sound designer to do a sound design pass. Oscar Carell did it on this particular film. It just brings it to a whole new level, having the sound design. And then sometimes the composer, to do custom music, all that kind of stuff. So once we're ready to deliver the final files, there's a few things that we like to include. So obviously the final video renders in different formats for them. So like a 4K version and an HD version, and a version if we're doing 2:3:5 aspect ratio that has the black bars. When they post it on Instagram, it doesn't get cropped. So making sure it's clear which ones are which. Thumbnails for the videos for both vertical and horizontal formats if you're going to put it on Instagram or not. Still images, we'll try to export like frames from the whole thing, because they can often our clients will end up using still frames from this in their print media across kind of broader campaigns. Social teasers we'll often do to kind of help them release it, and then also kind of a document that gives them steps for how to release it effectively. Once we deliver the final product, then we'll invoice them for the remainder of the project. And it's important, again, just to treat your clients really well. Part of being able to get more work in the future is impressing them all along the way, being really clear to communicate, keeping them updated on where you are in the process. And then we usually try to kind of follow up. We'll send them a Christmas card. We'll do just fun, we'll send them maybe a fun gift of some kind as well. But it just helps us kind of maintain that relationship moving forward. So we're going to go ahead and just hit a quick recap, and then we'll get to the
questions.
to questions.
All right, so quick recap. Pre-production, it's the most important part of the process. Take extra time here to prevent problems later. Make sure to be communicating well with your client, your crew, and each other along the way. Production, this is putting all that prep into action. Unexpected things always come up, so be flexible in rearranging. Keep the people that you're working with, keep them first, their first priority. Post-production, have a process to keep things moving at this stage and get review from other people. Make the process as smooth as you can for the client. And just remember that having a solid process from start to finish is key to having a smooth and successful project.
So you'll see in your handout we have some recommended resources and stuff. I don't know if we included too many books, but one of the things is we do have, John Clay and I have a course all about promo filmmaking, and we do a coached version. In this fall, we'll have like an 8-week, basically we'll walk you through making a promo film on your own over the course of 8 weeks. So if that's something you're interested in, I know we weren't able to cover everything today, but
and the interview mini course as well.
And we have also a course, a little mini course that's all about interviewing, and it's really helpful just to kind of learn how to conduct good interviews. So, anyways, just some resources, questions.
Yes.
All right.
I think she was first.
You're first. Yeah, go for it.
What would you pay a composer?
That's a great question. So what would we pay a composer? It really just depends on the composer and what skill level they are. So, I mean, it could be anywhere from I don't know.
$2,000 to $3,000 is what we've done for some of these projects for just a 3-minute film.
It could even be up to like $3,000 per minute. Like, it just depends on what level of composer you have. If they're more like somewhat beginner, $3,000, not beginner, but like if they're not as well known, $3,000 for a 3-minute video. I guess that's same thing. Well, not same thing, but like $1,000 per minute versus $3,000 per minute.
Yeah.
Them said it. You said it.
We kind of usually try to reach out to
we
a
negotiate
composer
a little
ahead
bit.
of time, or we're like,
yeah.
what do you need? Because we don't want to jip people, obviously, and so but we also have a budget, so a lot of times we'll reach out before we even pitch a budget. So, yeah. Question? Yes.
So to me, this is a very long form ad, right?
Yep.
Promo. So
Yep.
how does your client? What was the cost of the first video you showed?
The Riverside Sheriff's Department.
It was between like 70 and 90,000.
So
yep.
I work a lot in social media for aviation and all this.
Yeah.
I do a lot of short form stuff on social. This is very long form. So how do they
Yeah.
get a return on investment? How do they use
Yes. That's a great question.
That's a really good question.
And that's
it's
one
not
of
going to be a Facebook ad or
Yes.
a short.
So we should repeat
to get
the
their
question.
attention.
Yep.
It's long form, so it's going to. How do they use it?
Yeah. So the question was, especially since these are such long form content pieces, how are they using it? Because social media is all about short form. So that's a great question. That is one of the things we talk with the client about up front, which kind of determines what type of project, because we will do go short social campaign stuff as well. These are like brand hero pieces, more or less. So for the Riverside recruiting film, that basically, the first goal is to create that film, which they use like trade shows. They host like all the sheriffs from across California come to Riverside County every other year, or is it something like that?
Something
or every
like that,
once every
yeah.
4 years, something like that. And so they premiere a new video to kind of say, this is who we are. It also, YouTube, they do put it on social media. They do get a lot of traction on it, surprisingly. So those are, and they show it at like trade shows. They show it at like almost every single event that they do. So it's kind of like a hero piece. It's on their website, on their recruiting page. So that's one piece of it. The other thing is at the same time as that, we did basically a content capture. So now they have a whole library of basically every scene you saw in that has like a lot more footage associated with it that we also shot.
That was part of the budget. They bought out all the footage.
Like all the rights.
Because when we work with clients, we give them just the final deliverables and we own the footage. So in this case,
unless they buy like the
all
footage library, buy all of the raw footage, we'll usually do the extra mile of like kind of essentially doing a rough grade on all of it, delivering it in really easy to use formats, and then organize all of it, give them like a structured like ProRes renders of everything, as well as like a Premiere template with all the stuff. So in this case, Riverside has an entire video team in-house. So they're able to take all the footage we've done, remix it into reels, and like they'll go shoot additional interviews or different things, and then use that as B-roll.
So their ROI is more of a long-term.
Yeah.
Plus you chop it up so they can
Yeah.
insert throughout the year type thing.
Yeah, the long-term ROI on that. And I think the other aspect too is these types of pieces are branding related often. So it's about brand building and brand awareness more than just individual subjects most of the time. But a lot of times, like with this, even the Greenville one, we did 10 or 16 like vertical shorts with content from the film. So like the interviews, those different things. So we were talking about like the promo film process, but there's obviously
a lot of side
a lot
stuff
of
that
different
they-
deliverables you can create kind of from that main content capture piece.
This is your grand package, and
Yep.
you break it up.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep. So
yes.
really good question.
Yeah.
I don't remember what order everybody raised their hands in, but
Over here.
go to you next.
Do you guys ever hire colorists? And if not, roughly how long did it take you to color grade?
Yeah.
Color correct?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So do we hire colorists, and if we don't, how long does it take? Yeah, so we try as much as we can. We do hire a colorist. So like John Clay, like I said, who's doing the class next to us, he's a professional colorist, does an incredible job. I would say usually a couple weeks. We usually plan, he's not working on it straight for a couple of weeks, but in terms of him working on it, kind of feedback and back and forth, I'll usually try not to have less than a couple of weeks for that. If we're doing it more in-house, it could be quicker, especially if it's something where we kind of shot it, like it turned out pretty good in camera already, which is always the goal. Then we're just not as good at it. We can do it, but we'd like to hire it out if we can. Yeah. So, yes.
I was looking at the one for Greenville Seminary.
Yeah.
And I saw you shot a bit in the church.
Yeah.
As someone who lives in the Greenville area, I know that's a very historic church.
Yes.
So how was it like to shoot in an area where obviously there would have been sensitivity with
Yep.
equipment potentially scratching something
Yeah.
or any other situation you've been in?
That's a good question. Also, that church does not have fire alarms.
Yeah. Well, so that's a great question. The question was basically, how do we approach shooting in like sensitive locations and stuff like a historic church?
One thing I want to mention about that really quick is a lot of time we get these locations because of our client.
Mm-hmm.
They knew the pastor of that church. That's how we got it. If we just randomly were like, hey, can we shoot in your church? They probably, who are you? What are you doing?
Yeah.
So because of the client and their investment into the project that they've hired us to do, they will help us get locations and communicate with people to get the best locations that we can.
Sometimes they don't have connections or don't have the time, and so we have to kind of go out and do that legwork, but it's always way more effective when they can reach out, because a lot of what we're doing is not local to where we live, and so they have those local connections the way that we wouldn't. So it's a good note.
And
on
then
getting
with the gear
location.
and
But
stuff like
yeah, so in that particular church, First Pres downtown, they were really chill about it, honestly. So we like to use haze in almost everything we do, and fire alarms are a real trick because you don't want to get the fire department called if you can help it. Also, setting the alarms off multiple times during a school day is not ideal. May or may not have happened before, but you can block return error. So the key is don't only block like you just turn off the alarms in that part of the building, but actually block the return air vents. That was the key that we missed before, because it'll suck the smoke to other rooms. And
but yeah, in that church.
But in that church specifically, they didn't have smoke alarms because it's an old building. It's grandfathered in. So in that main sanctuary area, they didn't. A lot of times we'll put like tennis balls like on like the extremities of C-stands and other things just to kind of cushion it. We'll put down like Fernie pads or other stuff just to kind of help make sure we don't scratch anything. But yeah, I think that's probably the main thing. So
think in the back.
Yes, Courtney.
Could you tell us about this Motion University on-set experience 2026 that I see on the handout?
Yes. So
what was the question?
At Motion, the question was, can you tell us more about Motion University on-set experience? So it's something we did. I think the last one we did was 2019, but we're bringing it back in 2026. So basically, we can bring a group of students in person with us, and we go and create different levels of promotional films and be able to work in person with you guys for a week.
Yep.
So it's really fun. We don't have a sign up for it yet because it's 2026, but you can sign up on the website for the email list and be notified. So
I think.
Yeah.
Is there any place we can get this slideshow?
Yeah, definitely. If you want to shoot me an email, my email is andrew@bartlett.co. I would be happy to send you the slides for sure.
And yeah, we will be around.
Yes.
After this session, we'll stick around for a little bit. So if people have more questions.
We have time for one more question?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
You had your hand up for a while.
Yeah.
No, I've got
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, this one I didn't really have planned to think about. But, talking about communicating with the client about all of your needs. So what are some, I guess, how you start talking about, hey, these are locations that we need.
Sure.
So I guess the question is how you start that process.
Yeah, that's a good question. So so the question is how to talk to the client and start the process to talking to them about locations and needs that you have. So you're starting a little bit with their vision. So like, for example, with Riverside County, they were like, we want you to showcase the whole county. and it's like the size of what? The state of New Jersey.
Yeah.
So we're like, okay, we're going to showcase the whole county. So they already have some of those expectations going into it. Like, okay, we know we're asking you to do this, so we're going to help you with that.
So we just asked them, like, okay, so what do you think would be like
Yeah.
key things about the county? Obviously, we kind of
Exactly.
learned about it. They had some key events, so like the PGA Tour is in Palm Springs.
Yep.
We wanted to hit some like concerts, some like rodeos, different things. So they kind of gave us some ideas.
So some of that comes from the client. You know, they already want those locations or those things to be shown or whatever. But sometimes we have a project, like another one we did a couple years ago where it was fully narrative film that we did for a client. And so we're really having to find all those things ourselves, the houses to shoot in, you know, the parks or locations and all of that. So in that case, we're the ones having to go out and do it, and we'll maybe ask the client for, hey, do you have any recommendations on a church we could shoot in for this scene? But if they can't find something, we're going to do that ourselves.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that kind of answers the question.
Starting like the conversation is more or less the first thing we do is pitch them the creative of like, here's the story that we think we want to tell,
Yep.
and then we can kind of have the conversation of what it would take to do that in terms of locations and stuff. So.
Thanks, Nick.